Hello and welcome to the Srijan Wednesday webinar. If you are joining us for the first time, this is a community initiative by Srijan Technologies, where you can tune in to some great sessions on topics ranging from front-end technologies, UI UX and mobile apps to media, entrepreneurship, community building and digital marketing. Today we have with us Matt Gleman. Matt will be taking us through Drupal Commerce 2.x. Drupal Commerce was already a powerful e-com solution when built on Drupal 7, but with Drupal 8 they have re-evaluated its features and architecture that makes it so much easier to use and develop with. A bit about Matt before we start. Matt is the US team lead at Commerce Guys and also the co-maintainer for Drupal Commerce. He has been working with Drupal since 2013 and has contributed to over 60 community projects. While mostly focusing on Drupal and PHP development, Matt has created the contribkanban.com AngularJS application to provide Kanban boards for the Drupal community to collaborate on. Thanks, Matt, for joining us today. Before we start the session, I would request all participants to please type in all questions that you have, and we will take them up in the last 15 minutes of the session. Also, please don't forget to take the conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW. You can share your thoughts by tagging us and Matt in your tweets using our handles @Srijan and @NMDMath. So, without taking up any more time, let's get started. Matt, over to you.
All right. Hi. Welcome everybody for joining. So we're going to talk about Drupal Commerce 2.x, the native e-commerce framework for Drupal, and what we've got coming down the pipe. So Drupal plus Drupal Commerce equals flexible e-commerce. As we all know how flexible Drupal is, now imagine if it's powering your e-commerce. To go a little bit about myself again, I am a senior Drupal consultant, title change at Commerce Guys. Because recently Commerce Guys went under a shift. Platform.sh went into their own company, and now Commerce Guys is their own company, adopting a new operating model focused around the development of Drupal Commerce, which consists of myself, Boyan, and Ryan. We'll be delivering affiliate integrations and expert commerce consulting to our exclusive delivery partners such as Acromedia and Actualis. I am a co-maintainer of Drupal Commerce, Kickstart 2, and multiple items in the contrib space. And I'm also the author of the Drupal 8 Development Cookbook, which I found out was published today through Pack Publishing. So let's kick into what we're all here for. So I said Drupal Commerce is the native e-commerce framework for Drupal, powering truly flexible e-commerce. So 2.x is all about looking backward and moving forward on all the topics of e-commerce that makes e-commerce hard: taxes, fees, discounts, pricing, addressing, checkout, product management, catalog management, order workflows, payments, and every other niche edge case that is needed. Before going in, we're going to cover the groundwork that goes into Drupal Commerce and what builds it. First, we started with the libraries. This abstracted the core concepts that make e-commerce hard. It's like we want to provide a simpler solution to these. It also, by using libraries, it allows us to do PHP at large, which means that other applications can use these libraries that then will improve them and also benefit Drupal Commerce as a whole. In fact, the Commerce Guys International Library influenced how Symfony International Library works. And you could say that we were the first to get off the island. For example, Commerce International Library was first worked on in August 2014. Since we have libraries, we are using Composer. Currently, to add Commerce to an existing Drupal 8 site, you will need the Composer Manager module that allows the Composer to know of all the requirements or all the dependencies for modules inside your Drupal installation. Or if you're starting a new Drupal 8 site, we have a project base that you can use. So if you run Composer, create project, project base, store name, it will create a full Drupal install for you. And for more information, you can read Boyan's blog post that dives into Composer, especially if the whole concept is new to you. And then recently, a pull request was merged in for the Wikimedia Composer Merge plugin. That's what Drupal core uses to manage Composer, and that will hopefully once Drupal core is updated, deprecate Composer Manager completely, and you'll just be able to write composer require Drupal/commerce in any Drupal 8 site and have all your dependencies in place. We have the inline entity form. It was developed for Commerce 1.x to improve the product user experience. It is now standard in 2.x. It is used to manage your product variations. So when you have your product and you need to specify the medium or black, medium or blue, this is how you will edit them. It also is used to manage the order line items, and is used in other areas of the contributed project space. So it's not just a Commerce Guys project, it is a Drupal community project. We are also using the profile module. Profile is the Drupal 8 ported profile 2. We will be using it in Drupal Commerce to replace the Commerce customer profile entity, and it will also replace the need for address book because it has been developed in such a way to support multiple profiles and selecting a default. We are also using State Machine. State Machine allows you to have workflows that are composed of states and explicit transitions between them, such as it must move from checkout to payment to fulfillment. You can't skip from checkout to straight fulfillment because it has to go through a specific workflow. And each order type can have a different workflow. For more information on that in detail, we'll go on that. We'll touch it a little bit more later, but there's also a Commerce 2.x story that is on the drupalcommerce.org blog. Address. So address is the Drupal 8 error to address field. It uses the Commerce Guys libraries to provide a more sane approach to addressing. It provides address formats because every country has their addresses formatted in a different way, and it's powered by Google's data set. Coming with address are the ideas of zones. And a zone is useful because it allows you to specify what makes up that zone. So if you're using shipping and you have a nexus, you have to charge tax in those areas, and tax ends up using these. So for example, if I have an e-commerce site where my fulfillment center is out of Oklahoma, I need to make a zone for that and ensure that taxes happen, and this allows you to group it. Or if you have multiple nexuses, let's say Oklahoma and California, you can ensure that tax is charged in those areas. All right, so that's the groundwork, the base contributed modules that we're using to build Drupal Commerce. So now let's dive into the meat of the topic. Currencies and pricing. For currencies, we're using CLRDR data, and that's coming through the Commerce Intel library. It allows us to do internationalized formatting by locale, and there's a reason why this is important. So the way that a price is formatted in German when you're in Austria is different than the way it would be formatted when you're in Germany. And so the CLDR project is just a way to have normalized format data, even though it may not match the official format, but it's most commonly used, and it's backed by other large software projects. Next, we have taxes, and it provides a smart data model for fluctuating tax amounts, such as a lot of VAT taxes will increase year to year by some odd percentage. Through our libraries, it comes with predefined tax formats for predefined tax rates rather for EU, Switzerland, and I believe Australia is in there now too. And it also provides resolvers that allow you to take certain contexts and apply a proper rate based on those contexts. With Drupal 8, we are harnessing the entity system and allowing there to be stores. So when you build a Drupal Commerce site in Drupal 8, you have the ability to support multiple store locations, such as if you're international, or if you want to do a marketplace style with multiple sellers, such as like an Etsy. There are billing country options and per store tax settings, such as where you can allow billing information to be from and what taxes are applied. So generally what had to be a global configuration setting can now be done per store. So a large feature request is people always want to show a phone number for the store. And before there was no simple way to do that. Well, now you can. Now you just add a field to the store bundle and you have a store phone number. Stores and orders and products. So now that we have multiple stores, orders can only belong to one store, because usually an order is not made across multiple locations, but products can be part of multiple stores. So you do not need to add in an individual product for each store. When you make a product, you can select what stores it is available from and their orders. We have a Drupal console command for generating stores, so that way you don't have to actually go into the UI to add that. Because mind you that you can't technically make your first product until a store is created. So this way, if you have a demo site or you want to you have a lot of stores that you need to input, we have this command, Drupal Commerce create store, allows you to provide the name, email, the store country, which is an autocomplete, and it will automatically suggest the currency. Hit enter, and your store is created for you. Okay, next up, products. So products are a product and a variation entity. Previously in Drupal 7, you knew it as a node content type that had a product reference field that went to variations. This has been simplified. We now just have product. There are variations that are entities, but the user experience is now more simplified, that you're adding a single product that has multiple options into it, and this is a normalized user experience that we've seen across other e-commerce platforms. So each product type has a matching variation type, so it is a one-to-one bundle reference, but you can have multiple variations inside the product. And then attributes are done via entity references. This is a change from Drupal 7 where we allowed list fields of text, but the problem with those are they're pretty much immutable once you have data in that field. You can't add or adjust the options. So now it's done by entity references such as like a taxonomy term, or it could actually be anything you want now that we have Drupal 8, and that's what identifies your available options. And when they're exposed on the cart, that is how you're able to choose red or small to identify what variation they're purchasing. Next we have orders, and orders are one of the more exciting things that I think of that have been improved in Drupal and Commerce 2.x. So we have order type support, so now you can have different types of orders, such as a shippable order and a digital order. As I said before, with State Machine, we now have workflows. So I like to think in 1.x, when you went to go edit or add an order, you're just given a page with a bunch of levers. There wasn't really any direction as to what you were to do, or what you can do, or what each option might have meant. But now it has a much more direct approach when managing the order. I have a little GIF going that just shows the order creation process. And the first thing that you do is you have to pick who the customer is for, or if it's a new customer. And you have the ability to change the placed timestamp. And that's a new item for Drupal Commerce 2.x. The place timestamp allows you to identify when the order has been completed, and that can mean whatever it means in your business model, but typically that would be when an order went through checkout or when the order was ready to be picked from the warehouse. Previously we only had created and updated, so now we had this placed, and that makes reporting much easier. And also with orders, we have order level pricing that allows you to manually enter in the price when creating an order instead of being forced to use what is currently on the product's actual price. Carts have had an improvement. You can now have multiple carts. So this allows somebody to have a cart in each store and choose which one they want to check out with. Even multiple carts in a single store. So if an admin created an order, they can use the new cart flag to say that it's a cart and the user can check out with it. Previously, with 1.x, cart was a state of an order. So when an order was first created, it was a cart and then moved forward, and there could only be one cart at a time. Well, now if a customer calls and you have a customer support engineer that creates an order for them, they can flag it as a cart. That customer can log in and then check out with that order, and you don't need to come up with some workaround for the customer support engineer to check out for the user or have to complete payment. They can set it up for the end user to fulfill their own checkout. We've had improvements to the shopping cart block. Previously, it was just a view that showed the amount and it had a link to checkout, or you'd have to go create your own. Well, now we have a more enhanced block. It shows an icon with the item count, which is what most systems are doing now. When you click on this, if JavaScript is enabled, it will open and expand to get details, which will show you a view that lists all the items in each cart, and we'll have a link to the cart. If they don't have JavaScript, it just clicks through straight to the cart page. This is powered by Vue, so you can customize it as needed. And if you edit the block, if you configure the block rather, you're able to turn off the expand option and have it just link through. At the same time, you can alter it from saying items to widgets or shoes if you're just a shoe store. And one thing out of the box, it provides the default cart icon because we need to make this look good with Bartik. We need to provide something out of the box. What's using the new library management system in Drupal 8 to allow you to remove part of this. So we provide a, for example, cart.layout.css, and that just provides the generic styling to support the expand and allow the icon to be there. And then there is a .theme.css, and that's what actually puts the icon in. So with your own theme, instead of having to use a exclamation point important to override the icon, you could just override that library to put in your own icon. So we're giving you some kind of default so you have something to go with, but we're making it easy to change and use what you actually need for your implementation. We also have an improved add to cart form. So this is a big change from what we had in 1.x. Previously, the add to cart form specified what the line item type was and if you could show quantity or not. Well, all that power has been given to the line item that controls that will be for the variation. So each variation type will specify what line item it uses. So the add to cart form will then render the appropriate form display for that line item. So the purchase entity is what has a field widget that shows the attribute selection, all the radio buttons. And if you need to add a custom field, such as custom print, because they can put their own custom text on this t-shirt, you now just create a new field on the entity and expose it in the form display. If you wanted to change the quantity, if you wanted to allow them to set the quantity, you would then change it from being disabled to having a widget, and now somebody can actually enter if they want to buy 1, 2, or 10 items. And then here's a quick GIF that goes through, this is the add to cart form and block on its own. So you can pick the different items, it remembers it, your options as you go. You can expand the cart block and actually go to the cart. So next is checkout. Right now we don't have a checkout module. We are currently working on it, and we're working on it because we're taking a lot of time researching the user experience revolved around it. And not even just checkout in general, but even so specific as how to reuse an address. What are people doing that has the best user experience for selecting an address that doesn't, one, it doesn't require it to be fully JavaScript. What can we do to just make it work without having to add a lot of bloat? But one good thing is that each order type will have its own checkout workflow. So, for example, let's say you have a free trial product and some kind of product that doesn't require payment. Well, you could set up a checkout that just skips the payment option and only makes them configure their account. And let's say you have an upgrade type product. So if you're doing like a software service, that checkout could skip their account information because you already know it, but force them to do payment. And other business needs that require different information during checkout. One thing we'll also support is improved guest and authenticated checkout experiences. In 1.x, there's at least 5 contributed modules that try to solve this problem. Each take a different approach. They overlap in different ways, and each have the same amount of effort going into them when this needs to be a combined effort and put into core for the checkout. With Alpha 3 tagged last week, I believe, that was a lot of the cart improvements, so now we're going to be really focusing on checkout. And at the same time, I want to say, just because we don't have checkout, that doesn't mean you can't start using Drupal Commerce 2.x to start your site, because you still have to build a product architecture, you still have to build the rest of the Drupal site as it is, and you still have to implement your theme. The last part would really be your checkout item. And if you have a closer deadline than when checkout could be available, you could easily integrate with a hosted checkout form through your payment gateway. You just add a button on the cart that redirects them with the information to your payment gateway, and you could have an up and running Drupal Commerce site that way. Um, Also left to do is payments. We've saved this for last because we want to improve the API and expand it, such as for auths, refunds, and etc. For any of those that have implemented a payment gateway before, there was a lot that you had to do. The developer experience was a little rough, and by rough I just mean a lot of copy, paste, and tedious work, and we hope to improve that the next one. We also want to have built-in tokenization in core. So that means card on file in core. We want to support that we can store the tokens that reference a customer profile on your payment gateway so you can reuse credit cards by default. And also the concept of modes. So all payment gateways have a sandbox or production, whatever they choose for their terminology. There's a testing environment and a production environment. Currently, if you have multiple gateways, you need to make sure that each gateway is put in the sandbox on your local development, such as like PayPal, Authorize.net, and like a wire transfer. So you have those three. If you're testing, you need to make sure that those are put into sandbox, or even in production, you want to make sure that they're not like carried over from sandbox somehow. So if we put in a global environment that treats it as this site is in sandbox mode or this site is in production, instead of it being a per payment gateway setting, it could be a site setting as a whole that the payment gateway is checked. So those are the features and what's to come and where we're kind of working on. So the next thing is you should get involved and join in on the fun. Every week, Wednesday at 3 p.m. GMT +2, which is about 9 a.m. Central Time, GMT -6, we host office hours in the IRC channel Drupal Commerce. So if you have questions or you want to see how you can help, we're there, and we're also hanging out in there every day pretty much. So I know I am. I idle in there, so feel free to ping at any time. To learn more about the development as it's happening, you can check out our blog, drupalcommerce.org/blog. If you want to learn how to start contributing, go to drupalcommerce.org/contribute/2.x. That has the reiteration of the information of the office hours, and I try to take notes from what's happened and put them there. So there's a Google Drive folder that links all the notes. If you want to get started and get an environment set up, there is docs.drupalcommerce.org/v2/contributing/getting started. This will show you how to get an environment set up and ways that you can help. And then if you want to learn more about specific 2.x development and some of the stories that we've written, you can go to the blog, and they're tagged as Commerce 2X. And this goes into more detail, each of the features that we have covered and how they came to be. And I highly recommend reading any of the stories revolving tax and addressing to show just how complicated those are and how we're working to make that simpler to work with. And not just in Drupal, but the PHP community at large, because we could all benefit from these shared resources. And also, if anyone's attending MidCamp in Chicago next weekend, myself and Ryan will be there, along with a handful of other contributors, and we'll be sprinting on Drupal Commerce, and then also in DrupalCon New Orleans. So there will be some physical sprinting going on if anybody cares to join in. And with that, I want to say thank you for joining. You can follow me on Twitter at NMDMet. My Drupal.org handle is mglomman. Kept the slides a little short because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions because commerce is complicated and Drupal Commerce is one of the more popular solutions for Drupal.
Thank you, Matt, for that insightful presentation. And we would just wait for a couple of questions to come in before we start on with the Q&A session. So while we are waiting for people to type in their questions, could you just give us a very quick recap of the differences between Drupal Commerce 1.x and 2.x?
So one of the biggest difference is we're giving you better defaults out of the box. In 1.x, you were given Drupal Commerce has always been a framework, just like Drupal. Drupal doesn't really give you that many opinions. You're left to mold what you need. But with Drupal Commerce 2, we want to give you some opinions and some defaults that are easy to peel back, but give you more out of the box. So you're not going to enable Drupal Commerce and get like a Shopify, because that is a very specific implementation and can be very limited in some use cases. But we'll give you more to work with than you did in 1.x, such as a better shopping cart block. You don't have to make your own custom one. You could easily use what's provided. The order administration interface, the fact that now when you create an order, you don't just fill it in like it's a blank piece of paper. You have to explicitly say who it is for, and you can optionally say when it was placed. When you create the order, all you're then able to do is add the products that are part of the order. Any other options are their own functions. If you need to change the customer the order is for, there's a reassign button that can change it. And we're going to have, we still need to add in the buttons that move it through its transitions. So if you have a typical flow between checkout, payment, or if it went from collect billing, collect shipping to getting shipping rates to collect billing, you would have to manually move it through each process. You couldn't just skip through one. And each transition can have its own validations, so whatever your business needs are, they can be met. And also the user experience around managing orders. Since now for a merchant, it's much more seamless that you're just adding in a product and saying what makes up that product, instead of needing to know the behind the scene relationships and references that are going on. And the added cart form is now more powerful, since it is just using the form display mode for line items, and that's what controlling that. So whatever kind of fields you can put on there, or however you want to customize it, is only a field and a field widget away, really exposing the possibilities for customization.
Alright, so 2.x is going to be a more versatile version of the previous one. And now we have a couple of questions coming in. So first up, how is Drupal Commerce handling the cash on delivery?
What was that last part? The cache and validate?
Cash on delivery, COD.
Oh, cache on delivery?
Yes.
That hasn't really been brought up, but that would just be a payment gateway, and that's more of an implementation item. So I would just write a, when we have the payment API, just as you would in 1.x, you would create a payment method called cash on delivery, and whatever your business rules are, you would have to implement them. That's a very specific implementation, but in no way are you limited from doing that. It's just a payment gateway that says don't accept payment now, and it would have to be manually processed later, which we do have the administration pages that allow you to add payments, and that's currently available in 1.x and will be available in 2.x.
All right. Next, do we have a functionality to add sub-users to stores for managing store data?
So to make sure I understand, so to have a user that belongs to a specific store and not necessarily the Drupal site as a whole.
Yes.
So that I don't see being part of what Commerce would provide, but that's something that could be easily managed via organic groups, or you don't even need organic groups to pull that off. You could create a reference field on the store that says, and then that would tell you who belongs to the store. You'd have to write some code, but based on whatever logic you decide, you would add that user to that store's reference and know who belongs to it. And if you wanted to, you could implement some access control items that say this user can only see products for this store. That would be some custom code to this implementation, or I'm sure once organic groups is out, you could turn a store into a group, and that's how it could work. But on previous experience, I've implemented something like that in Drupal 8 already, and you don't need organic groups. So you could work on something like that already.
Okay, so next we have, what's been the biggest challenge in adapting to Drupal 8 development with a project this large?
So for me, speaking of experience, this would be a better question for Brian almost, because he's been in the Drupal 8 landscape longer than I have. But from what I've seen, I think the biggest issue has been the ever-evolving Drupal core. Like I said, I just finished my book, and even from when I started writing it in October or September even to when Drupal 8 was released, there's a lot of changes that happened. And they started this in 2014 when core was ever evolving. Like, I don't know if anyone can recall, but originally config was in the database, then moved to disk, then moved back to the database. So even the configuration system has gone through some flip-flops. So I'd say the biggest issue has just been chasing core and trying to integrate with third-party libraries on coding standards. So with PSR2, it's camel case, right, for variables and everything, but in Drupal core, classes can be camel case, methods can be camel case, but internal variables or something of that sort is still snake case. So the code forming doesn't really match up when you're integrating with a third-party library. So those have been some of the issues.
Our next question is, how has the configuration management initiative in Drupal 8 changed the way you manage exported configurations?
So we've actually hit an interesting issue with configuration management in Drupal 8. When we're still in alpha, but once we hit beta, we want to provide upgrade paths. So you could technically, like how I said, you could start now. That'd be one hindrance. But once we hit beta, you could start and ensure that you have an upgrade path between betas. However, in Drupal 8, configuration is now owned by the site. Working with Drupal 7, we've been used to modules owning the configuration, such as Entity API's CRUD, the CTools object CRUD, and features even their custom implementations. The configuration is owned by the module and can be imported automatically or reverted if needed, or at least the state checked if it's been modified or not. A module can't necessarily do that easily in Drupal 8. So last week we worked on a solution that will be in Commerce called Config Updater. It is a service that allows you to import, update, or delete configuration as needed, and you pass it configuration names, and it will talk to the configuration management service to say, hey, if this doesn't exist yet, can you import it? Because right now, once you install a module, any new configuration added must be manually coded into an update hook. You can't just put it in a config folder and assume Drupal will pick it up, which can be very cumbersome if you're adding new views, because views are huge config files, and having to manually write that out in code would be atrocious. So with this service, you could pass it a handful of view config names and run the import, and it will import those for you automatically. At the same time, if Commerce is providing views, well, what if we're making enhancements? What if we had a community help that improved the order listing page and was like, you know what, that is great user experience. How can we easily deliver that to anyone who's already installed Drupal Commerce? We'd have to write the code. We actually have no way of checking if you have modified that view. We don't want to override it if you've modified it because you have made specific changes. But for those who have not, we want to give them this enhancement. Drupal core does not provide a way to do this, but our config updater service provides a method for checking if a configuration has been modified using its install hash. If it has not been modified, it will update that config to what we have provided in the newest version. And as a little footnote to that, we do have a Drupal core issue about allowing modules to see if a config has been modified. There's the config manager service, which is just a giant class of utility functions. The goal is to have that patched in so at least other modules can see if their config has been modified before attempting to manage it. So that's been a large difficulty, especially in a large project like this. Now that Views is in core, people will be more encouraged to use Views for their user interfaces, but they don't have a way to easily update them, especially once rules becomes more stable and people integrate with the rules. There's no way to easily update or add existing configuration for those without writing a lot of code and possibly reverting customizations.
Okay, so I would like to once again uh, ask all our users to type in any questions that they have, and we will take them up one by one. And the next question that we have here is, why should I choose Drupal Commerce instead of Magento?
Well, first off, Magento doesn't support content. This is the day and age where I haven't seen a single e-commerce site that wasn't talking about SEO. So Drupal Commerce works in with one of the best open source content management systems. So if you want to make a site, go ahead and make it store.mydomain.com, but you're going to lose on the SEO benefit of having a single domain that supports. Cross-selling. I write a blog post and I want to mention products. Well, I now have an entity reference on my blog content type that links directly to my products, or even sets up a direct add to cart. So the integration is much more there. And I'll speak out of experience. I tried to run Magento lately, and I couldn't even get it to run on a 4 gig RAM like VPS. Like it was horrible to install. People like to complain about Drupal's install process, but I was confused even by Magento's system. I found it to be more difficult, and that's why I would recommend Drupal Commerce. It's just you also get the benefit of a good content management system and not just e-commerce.
Okay, so as you mentioned, you have written a cookbook for Drupal 8 users. So how would that help me prepare for Commerce 2.x?
So actually, it was the other way around. Commerce 2.x helped me prepare for the book. It happened kind of side by side, and my book is essentially a lot of lessons I learned from working with Drupal 8 and Commerce 2.x, instead of it being the other way around. The research I did for Commerce inspired me for some areas of the book for what people might need to learn. But at the same time, that made me have to read into core a lot more to actually have the research for the book. So it's helped me understand the internals of Drupal 8 when writing and understanding, like for instance, the routing system. The routing system in Drupal 8 is beautiful but magical at the same time. It's a lot more intense than it was in Drupal 7, but it allows for some really great things. So because of the book, I was able to research and understand those and hopefully bring some of that into 2.x, or at least how entity forms work. Like the form API hasn't really changed, but just the concepts of how forms are now and having a typed form state and working with that.
It seems like we also have questions being posted on Twitter. So one of those is there any module about the order management and address printing?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is there any module about the order management and address printing?
About order management. I guess I'm not sure how to. So the for order management, like beyond, not really beyond what we have. I'm not sure if they mean like with integrating with like an ERP, but I mean using what's available. I'm going to assume that order management means beyond what's done in Drupal Commerce and maybe with an ERP. But given that and what Drupal provides with like the built-in REST module, you could set up feeds for your ERP to read into, or even hooks inside Drupal that push the data out to your ERP. As far as I know, there isn't like a contributed module for that, and I don't know if there will be an 8.x since it is such a very unique use case. I guess on a side note for that, I am a maintainer of commerce reports, and one thing that I've learned from 7.x is people don't necessarily need what it provides. They don't need the UI that shows all the reports because they have an ERP for that or they have more in-depth needs. In 8.x, I would like commerce reports to be more of an API for getting denormalized data out of Drupal. For example, Drupal is a very normalized system. Every field has its own table, and every revision of that field is its own table. Commerce itself, you have a product and a variation typed in each field. You're dealing with like a lot of tables and joins. Commerce report would be a way to just create a normalized way to view that. So in order, you would know it's price, tax, and shipping all in one line. And I want that to make it easy to expose that over REST. So commerce reports can be a way to connect with third-party analytics and ERP systems. Not necessarily something that would be provided in core, but Contrib would be doing that.
All right. Next step is how is commerce affecting the entire Drupal 8 ecosystem?
I'd like to give a tip of the hat to Boyan on this one and all the others that he has worked with. I would say because Commerce has had a hard dependency on external libraries and needing to use Composer, he's been a driving factor and communicator with that movement to have better Composer support in Drupal core. Like I said, it's not just Boyan, but I want to give a tip of the hat to him and everyone he's worked with that has pushed for that effort, because now, like I said earlier in the slides, you can run a single Composer command and get a full Drupal site with Drupal Commerce and update core by writing Commerce update. And even inside Drupal, just writing Composer require Drupal slash commerce. So you don't need, it provides an alternative to having to use drush make. I'm not saying that that's a bad approach, but it's a beautiful thing because it makes integrating with PHP at large much easier.
Alright, so will 2.x adopt reward points, wallets, store credits similar to Magento?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Will Commerce 2.x adopt reward points, wallets, store credits similar to Magento?
What feature was that? Sorry.
So the features we are talking about is reward points, wallets,
Oh,
and
reward points. Sorry.
yes, sorry, and store credits.
Okay, so that would be a contrib module. I know people have done that in 1.x using the user points module and something else. Again, since Drupal Commerce is a Drupal module, that means you have the availability to tap into all of its APIs and other contributed projects. Nothing about the architecture of Drupal Commerce would prevent that from being set up. If Magento provides it out of the box, I can't say that Drupal Commerce would, but there's a way to make it work. And my argument to that is, if it's provided in Magento out of the box, well, it's not being focused on as directly by it being its own individual project that has its own requirements. So in Drupal, that is one nice point by having a decoupled nature in the projects, that user points has a multiple user base using it, not just commerce users. So you can take what everybody's working on and integrate that into Drupal Commerce for your specific need, but reap the benefits of others' work and others' requirements.
So is there an anticipated date for a release candidate?
So I know we plan on having hopefully on having a release candidate at DrupalCon New Orleans. So if you are going to be at DrupalCon, I recommend to come not just to sprint, but also to hopefully help us get a release candidate out at DrupalCon. I think that'd make for a pretty great party, so you should come help out.
I would like to request all our attendees who are planning on going to DrupalCon New Orleans to please attend the sprints and help Matt get out a release candidate for Commerce 2.x. The next question that we have is, can we associate multiple stores to a product?
Yep, a product can belong to multiple stores. So that way, let's say that if you have a store in Serbia, the United States, and France, but you have a product that can't be shipped overseas because it just doesn't make logistical sense, you would add that product to the France and Serbian store, and it could that way if somebody's billing code shows up in the United States, like they wouldn't be able to process that order because it's not valid for those two stores. So that's kind of how that works. But a product can be added to multiple stores or excluded from specific ones.
Okay. How efficient is 2.x for bulk product import to multi-stores?
For bulk product importers?
Yeah.
Currently, we don't have that in core, but I do want to take some time at MidCamp to work on Commerce Migrate and look into Commerce Feeds. I feel that in 1.x we had a bunch of different ways to import products into Drupal Commerce, and the initiative by the community kind of wavered. And there's ways to do it, but there's not like a strong definition on the proper way to. And I want to see that fixed in 2.x. I want to see a strong Commerce Migrate module. If we need feeds integration, then we do feeds. But that's one thing that I want to sprint on at MidCamp, and once we get a more, once commerce is further along, make sure that we have a way for bulk importing products. Because I know a lot of people have an ERP and Drupal Commerce is just the web front end. Like that's not their full product management. So we need a way to easily manage the catalog via those kind of systems or CSV imports. It may not be something that Core necessarily provides, but I want to make sure the tools are there so that way we can more easily integrate with those kind of systems.
Okay, once again to all our listeners, if you have any questions, please put them in so that Matt can take them up and answer them. The next question that we have is, how does your new book reflect upon your experiences with working on commerce?
What was that?
How does your new book reflect your experiences with working on commerce?
Working on Drupal Commerce. In the book, I don't really mention Drupal Commerce that much. I believe I make a little shout out to it in the 12th chapter or 11th chapter. I think it's the 11th chapter called "Getting Off the Island," and it talks about using Composer Manager and how it's required for installing Drupal Commerce currently. There is a section in the I made a chapter about plugins, and the last recipe is about creating your own plugin type. And previously, I made a port for the physical fields module, and so that way there could be a stepping way for Drupal Commerce and shipping. And in that, I talk about creating a custom plugin type that supports units of measurement. But that's about as much as the book covers on Drupal Commerce or any of its topics.
All right. I think this is one of the last questions that we have, unless our attendees want to send in more questions. So, people who are already using their sites on Drupal Commerce 1.x, is there a way for them to migrate to 2.x, or how would they go about it?
That's where the Commerce Migrate module is going to come in. We've already had a community member write a port of Commerce Migrate to support UberCart 6.x to Drupal Commerce 2.x. And it looked very easy to write. So that's one of the next steps is to work on the 1.x to 2.x migration. I actually believe that a community member started working on that task, and their handle's escaping me right now, but that's a good reminder to find them in IRC and see how that's going. But there will be a migration path, because as I said, I want to make that a focus to make migrating to Drupal Commerce 2.x easier, not just from 1.x, not just from UberCart, but from Magento and other platforms. So that way there's less Googling and frustration.
Okay, so that's great to hear. And at last, would there be anything else that you would like to say to our attendees in terms of the kind of contributions that you would like them to work on if they choose to contribute to the Commerce 2.0?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for joining in, and I honestly the best thing you could do is just hop in IRC and ask a question. The docs.drupalcommerce.org site is actually built up through Gitbook. I believe it's through Gitbook. So it's a GitHub repo that you could actually edit online and make submissions to. So even if you're not a coder, if you're a site builder, try out Drupal Commerce. Find bugs, open bugs, suggest documentation improvements. I'm working on some VMs and Docker images to make spinning up a one-off Drupal Commerce site much more easy. One's going to be for sprints, one for be for setting up quick demos of Drupal Commerce 2.x. So if you're not able to set up a local environment, I hope they'll have those out soon so you can give it a trial run. Give us feedback on the user experience, some of the improvements, how we can help, or even help write the docs. I mean, documentation is the hardest part. We have to keep writing features, but we have to keep the documentation up to date. And documentation is a hard thing to do in any software project.
Right. So with that, we have come to an end of Matt's session on Commerce 2.x. Thank you, Matt, for the insightful presentation and for taking up all the questions. And I would like to thank all our attendees for coming in today and listening into the session. If you have any more questions, please write them, send them to us at webinars@srijan.in. I would also like to announce that our next webinar is on building a data-driven content strategy, and it would be hosted on the 23rd of March and would be led by Obaid Malik, who works with Srijan Technologies. For registrations and more details, you would be getting a mail from us, so stay tuned. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. And once again, thank you, Matt, for the great session.
Thanks.